Good morning and welcome to Rising. It is a brand new week and we are here to bring you the news once again. Good morning, Niall.
Morning, Robby. How was your weekend?
It was perfectly enjoyable. How was yours?
It was equally satisfactory.
Nice to have the temperatures rise just a little bit in DC. We're no longer freezing quite so much.
Melting the snow, which is a good thing.
Yes.
But a lot of news to get to, as always these days, Robby. So what's on your radar?
Well, the CIA now agrees with two other federal agencies that the most likely cause of the COVID-19 pandemic is a lab leak from Wuhan, China. Now, this is a big admission because the CIA had previously stated it did not have enough confidence to choose between the two major theories, lab leak and natural animal spillover. The agency officially revised its opinion over the weekend, issuing a verdict of lab leak, albeit with low confidence. Now, some lab leak skeptical voices fretted that this must be an example of a government agency caving to political pressure in the Trump era, since incoming CIA chief John Ratcliffe has long preferred the lab leak explanation. But according to the New York Times, which is obviously not some apologist for the Trump administration, the CIA's decision to shift in favor of lab leak was actually made before Ratcliffe took over and has been, quote, in the works for some time. Now, Ratcliffe has, however, authorized the release of the CIA's analysis. Strikes me as a bit curious since Congress already ordered intelligence agencies to publish information that they have on the origins of COVID. As Rutgers University professor Richard Ebright says, he's a longtime critic, by the way, of dangerous gain-of-function research, he wrote this: the CIA analysis supporting lab origin of COVID was completed and published internally during the Biden administration. It was withheld from the public by the Biden administration in violation of the COVID-19 Origin Act of 2023, which mandates its release. Now, thank goodness the new administration is taking the important step of sharing with the American people the information they have that has led so many in the intelligence community to conclude that lab leak is the more likely explanation for the pandemic. Indeed, both the FBI and the Energy Department have already concluded that this is the best theory to explain where COVID came from. Now, the CIA's shifting stance, again, according to the New York Times, is, quote, based in part on a closer look at the conditions in the high-security labs in Wuhan province before the pandemic outbreak. In other words, U.S. intelligence officials have come to better understand just how appalling the safety conditions were in these labs. That's a huge indictment, not just of the Chinese government, which of course oversees such labs, but also of U.S. policymakers who funded dangerous research on viruses in these labs. Now, indeed, U.S. non-governmental medical research organization EcoHealth Alliance sought to use American tax dollars to conduct gain-of-function research in Wuhan, China. But in the grant proposal that EcoHealth Alliance was deliberately evasive about, they tried to mislead the regulators about where that research would be conducted. The group was eager to do it in China, but they knew this would spook U.S. regulators, and so they eagerly disguised this fact. But now we, the American people, know that the safety standards in the Chinese labs are so bad that federal intelligence officers are increasingly concluding that this is likely, not definitively, but likely, how COVID originated. The question becomes, will Dr. Anthony Fauci admit to, let alone face scrutiny for, being a main advocate of funding this dangerous research? As I explained in my radar last week, Fauci's preemptive pardon from former President Joe Biden covers not just his time as the White House's main coronavirus advisor, but actually kicks in back in 2014, the year President Barack Obama paused government funding of gain-of-function research. Fauci has subsequently admitted that he may have greenlit gain-of-function projects anyway under the guise of, you guessed it, national security. The Trump administration, thankfully, is preparing an executive order to again prevent this reckless scientific malfeasance. So we've had a cascade of developments, again, pointing to the strengthening of the lab leak position, with the Trump administration now also preparing action to halt funding for gain-of-function research, as Barack Obama did years ago. And now you have the CIA coming out and saying, we also prefer this explanation. This is not, according to the New York Times, because you've brought in a new Trump person, and that's when they ordered the agency to make this conclusion. It was already in the works and has to do with the conditions in the laboratories. And that is just so concerning that the intelligence people, they looked more closely at the lab conditions, and that strengthened their confidence that that's where COVID originated.
Yeah,
we were funding these things.
No, absolutely. Look, it's a very interesting story. There has obviously been momentum over time for the lab leak theory, and apparently this review stems from a thing that was actually ordered by Jake Sullivan in the Biden administration, someone who I'm critical of in other ways, but good for him if he insisted on this review. The now former head of the CIA apparently did take an agnostic position on which outcome, which theory was right, but said that the CIA should take a stance on it, and I think that's a good thing. There are obviously very serious questions around what we'll just call the wet market theory, including, I don't remember if it was an episode of Rising with you or with Amber, but we had someone on noting from the Wall Street Journal, I think, talking about the fact that if the wet market theory were true, you would obviously expect some evidence of cases in the very long distance, about 1,000 miles, between where such viruses would be expected to emanate and Wuhan, and there's not one case recorded.
There's a huge coincidence at work here, under either theory, because the coincidence, if it is lab leak, is that but the first outbreak, the first super spreader event, is at a wet market, which is the other place we would think COVID would occur naturally. So that seems coincidental. But then the other way, it occurred at a wet market, and there just happens to be a laboratory down the street of all places where they're doing dangerous virus research. I was trying to come up with a metaphor actually for it earlier. It'd be like, okay, let's say you have a dead body, someone who died in a bee colony where they were with a bunch of bees.
I'm intrigued as to where this is going.
No, bear with me.
Okay.
And this person's allergic to bee stings, and it's either, was it bee stings or was it a rare poison? Well, you'd say, well, of course it's bee stings. You found them in a bee farm. But then let's say later, you didn't find any bee stings on the person. It doesn't mean they're not there, but the person was really closely looked. There's no bee stings. And then also there is a rare poison factory right over there, and they've deleted all the security footage. And there are rumors that there was rare poison stolen from the lab. That would be the situation we fall in. I understand why people say, but it's in a bee place.
Right.
It's the bees. But then you look at all the other circumstantial stuff. Well, okay, but we didn't find any bee stings, and there was the poisons missing, and so that's the situation.
Every time this topic comes up, I'm thrown back to Jon Stewart's appearance, for which he took quite a lot of flack at the time on the left, about if there was a chocolate explosion in Hershey, Pennsylvania, where could that have emanated from?
Maybe it's the effing chocolate factory.
Exactly, and I think that Jon Stewart has been judged kindly by the verdict of recent history since then.
Indeed. Well, we've got lots more to get to today. Next up, Trump fired some inspector generals. We will discuss that topic, whether that was legal. Stay tuned.